What's up, y'all? If you are a lover of documentaries and a lover of 70s soft rock or a lover of 70s, 80s pop and rock, and even a lover of hip hop, you should, if you haven't already, watch Yacht Music, a documentary, documentary on Max. You know, that's HBO, formerly known as HBO Max. But hit the like and subscribe button as the intro plays. Now, yacht rock is characterized by 70s and 80s music that was kind of emo before emo was a thing.
It rocks, but it doesn't rock too hard.
And, you know, the groups.
Steely Dan.
The Doobie Brothers.
Toto.
Kenny Loggins.
Christopher Cross. Michael fucking McDonald.
Were some of the main players.
These artists provided the soundtrack of our lives.
But the real thing is, the controversy is these artists don't necessarily like the term yacht rock, because in the world of America, we turn everything into a joke, or we turn everything into a cult, if you will, so yacht rock has taken on this life of its own because of a web series called Yacht Rock, which was basically mocking the music, but also paying homage to the music. They were basically illustrating how these songs came about.
That's what a fool believes, Kenny. That's what a fool believes.
But this was a very interesting documentary, and I got my life back.
And your ass is next.
I felt all sorts of warm and fuzziness inside, because this is a music that I listen to quite frequently. If you look at my playlist on Spotify, I have at least, I think, like 10 hours of yacht rock, or light rock, more so light rock music that would be played on light rock stations. But I have a whole 10 hours, and I think I have like 16 hours of hip hop. So you kind of know where my heart lies when it comes to music. But anyhow, this isn't about me. This is about light rock and Yacht Rock, the documentary, and why I got my life.
Hallelujah! 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 Hallelujah!
You'll discover how the 1970s and 80s became the golden age of smooth sounds, with tracks like "I found the rains down in Africa. What a fool believes." Okay, so you can't use music on YouTube, so you're just gonna have to bear with my vocals. Okay, my vocals are not Michael McDonald's vocals, but they are vocals nonetheless. So these songs became anthems for an entire generation. And yes, there are debates in this documentary of what counts as yacht rock. But trust me, they break it all down. Because yacht rock is defined by some of them as California music, people who came from California. And then in the documentary, they also broke down that groups that were played on light rock stations, such as the Eagles, were not yacht rock because the Eagles had too much country influence. So they definitely defined what yacht rock was. However, the thing that made this documentary so great to me was how they connected the dots of all of these artists who were fairly unknown originally, and then sometimes not as respected, but they were playing on everybody's album. It's kind of like, in hip hop now, where, people are doing collabs, everybody's featured on somebody's collab. So you will find that Michael McDonald was on everybody's track. And you will find that if you look at liner notes, which is a lost art form since nobody buys, nobody has physical CDs or cassettes anymore where you read liner notes. Because I used to always read the liner notes. Whenever I would get a new album, the first thing I would do is read the liner notes. Who produced this? Who wrote this? Who designed the cover? Who did that? So that was something that I enjoyed doing, and I don't do anymore because what? I'm on Spotify. However, so all of these artists, from Toto, Ambrosia, Steely Dan, they were all going back and forth. And there was actually a SCTV sketch with Rick Moranis that showed Michael McDonald on the run, basically going through booth to booth. And it also showed how the black influence basically influenced this genre, if you will, for lack of better words. And that's what most genres in the United States. Everything stemmed from who? Black people.
You hear what you feel.
A lot of the black stations picked up my first album. They made it a hit. It caused a buzz that we weren't used to getting.
That's who. So give credit where credit is due. And I respect in this documentary that they did give credit to that, because this genre also was described as basically emo before emo was even a thing. These were emotional men who were upset, and they were, they showed their softer sides, hence soft rock, light rock. They showed their softer sides, and a lot of times the songs were written because they were lovesick over breakups. Or they were, feeling bad over, the demise of their relationships. So, and somebody in a documentary actually said it was, it was songs for sacks of losers they were happy to sing. But when, MTV came along, it kind of changed the game in the 80s, which because you had to look good, and people like Christopher Cross,
Because your looks ain't gonna get you paid.
who actually gained so much success from Ride Like the Wind, and more so with Sailing. He won like all the Grammys. Only Billie Eilish has won more Grammys than one Grammy, what is it, show.
I forgot.
Than Christopher Cross. He won too much too fast, and there was only one place for him to go down. But Christopher Cross, he wasn't like a looker. No disrespect, Christopher Cross, but let's just call a spade a spade. And Michael McDonald, he's not, your typical sex symbol. And the funny thing is, people often mock Michael McDonald's voice, like, what a fool believes. But you know that voice. And I would even venture to say that there are very few artists that have like very distinctive voices out there. I would actually say that Sade is one of those people, but her voice is distinctive. And not many people can replicate it, even if they cover one of her songs. But we're not talking about Sade. Although I would play a Sade song on a light rock station. Or like even Anita Baker, who's the queen of mean, apparently. Her voice is very distinctive. And incidentally, she covered one of Michael McDonald's songs, You Belong to Me, which was written by Michael and Carly Simon. They didn't cover that in the documentary. That's just an extra tidbit. But I suggest that you watch this documentary because it gave me all sorts of life. Now, I'm one who loves music documentaries. I love documentaries in general, but I love music documentaries because it takes my mind someplace that I don't typically go. Like, I like music just at face value. I like things at face value. Oh, that piece of art, I like it. Those beats, I like it. But it goes through the science of it all, and something that, I never really paid that much attention to because I was still a child in the 80s was when What a Fool Believes came out, everybody copied it. They copied that, what they call that Doobie Brothers bounce. You
just like all the biters. You just take a bite and leave the rest.
And if they played in the documentary all the songs that pretty much copied those keyboards, that same melody or beat rhythm that What a Fool Believes has. So I totally enjoyed that they showcased that because it educated me on sounds. Like, I feel like I know music, but I feel like I know music and the reason why things occurred a little bit more for this genre. So anyhow, it also showed, which I wish they covered a little bit more, about how hip hop, because hip hop is my favorite genre of all time, because I came up when hip hop was really just, making it splash. And so from the inception of hip hop to the golden years of hip hop, I was a hip hop head. And so they showed how hip hop was influenced by yacht rock. I mean, if you listen to samples, there are many samples in hip hop. They sample, primarily hip hop was sampling James Brown, but the people who sample yacht rock, they were like, y'all can have, this James Brown, that typical beat, but it was the ones who were more creative with the samples, who were like sampling Steely Dan.
What'd you say?
The women.
And De La Soul sampled Steely Dan originally. But what they did mention was that De La Soul was one of the first hip hop acts that basically was made an example of for sampling. So I wish they covered that. I wish the documentary had a part 2, because there's so many samples in hip hop that owe yacht rock. And one of the ones that they did mention was Regulate, Warren G's Regulate, which they claim is one of the most important songs in G-Funk.
Build a pocket knife, build a pocket knife, build a pocket knife.
And, it sampled Michael McDonald. So, and also there was, Questlove, who's like our resident documentary guy who's always talking on documentaries when it comes to music. Then they had Thundercat, who actually wrote a song, because it was his goal to write a song with Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins. And so they performed it. So it's like it gave more life. All these newer genres gave more life to yacht rock, which, for me, yacht rock was always about, or light rock was always about a feeling, a mood. It was happiness and melancholiness, and it's just a vibe and a groove, and I loved it. And that's kind of like how I feel about bossa nova. It's like happy, sad, which they call Saturday, or I may be mispronouncing that. But light rock always takes me to a place of nostalgia, happiness, and just vibes. So drop into the comments now and like and subscribe.